The F-16 Fighting Falcon screamed across the Nevada desert at Mach 1.2, its engines carving twin contrails through the crystalline morning sky. Inside the cockpit, Sarah Chen's hands trembled against the controls, not from fear, but from the weight of what she'd just done. I stole a $29 million fighter jet. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, all she could think about was the satellite phone buzzing in her flight suit pocket and the desperate voice that had shattered her quiet life 12 hours ago. "Sarah, they have Emma. They have our daughter." Her sister's words echoed in her helmet as she banked hard to avoid a commercial flight path. Below, the Mojave stretched endlessly, its sun-baked surface hiding secrets that most civilians would never imagine. But Sarah wasn't most civilians. She'd spent 8 years as an Air Force pilot before trading her wings for a desk job and what she'd foolishly believed would be a normal life. The radio crackled to life. "Unknown aircraft, this is Edwards Air Force Base. You are flying in restricted airspace. Identify yourself immediately." Sarah's finger hovered over the transmit button. Once she responded, there would be no going back. The stolen jet's transponder was already broadcasting her aircraft's identity to every military radar system within 500 miles. They knew exactly who had taken their plane. "Edwards Tower, this is Captain Sarah Chen, service number 2479856. I have an emergency situation." A pause. Then, "Captain Chen, you are ordered to return to base immediately. You are flying a stolen aircraft." Negative, Edwards. "I have a code black situation involving civilian hostages. Transmitting coordinates now." She punched the location into the aircraft's computer, a remote compound in the mountains of Eastern California where her 8-year-old niece was being held by men who claimed to represent a shadow organization within the military itself. Men who had given Sarah's sister Marina exactly 6 hours to deliver classified research that could revolutionize modern warfare, research that Sarah had helped develop before she'd gotten out of the game. The radio exploded with chatter as multiple voices began coordinating her intercept. She recognized some of the call signs, former squadron mates who would be genuinely conflicted about bringing her down. But orders were orders, and she was now officially a rogue pilot in command of one of America's most advanced fighter aircraft. Sarah pushed the throttle forward, feeling the familiar embrace of G-forces as the F-16 accelerated. The compound was still 40 minutes away, and she could already see contrails forming on the horizon behind her former colleagues, scrambling to stop her before she could reach her destination. She thought of Emma's laugh, of Marina's tears, of the choice that had brought her to this moment. Sometimes being simple meant making the most complicated decision of your life. Sarah had been restocking inventory in the small aviation supply shop she owned in Lancaster when her world exploded. The call came at 6:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that had been distinguished only by its complete ordinariness. She'd been thinking about dinner, whether to cook or order Thai food, when her phone rang. "Sarah?" Marina's voice had been barely above a whisper, tight with terror. "They have Emma." The plastic clipboard had slipped from Sarah's hands, clattering to the concrete floor of her shop. "What? Who has Emma?" "Marina, where are you?" "I can't. They said not to call anyone." "But you're not anyone. You're my sister." "Sarah, they know about Project Nightshade." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Project Nightshade had been buried so deep in classified files that even she had trouble believing it had ever existed. The experimental weapons system she'd helped test 7 years ago was supposed to have been scrapped, its research data destroyed. That's impossible. Nightshade was terminated. I kept copies. Marina's admission came out in a rush. I thought someday the technology could be used for humanitarian purposes, medical evacuations, disaster relief. I was working on modifications at the lab, trying to make it safer, and someone found out. Sarah had closed her eyes, already knowing where this was heading. Her sister, brilliant Dr. Marina Chen, had always been too idealistic for her own good. As a researcher at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, Marina had access to projects that could reshape modern warfare. But she'd also retained the naive belief that weapons technology could somehow be transformed into tools for peace. They took Emma from school, Marina continued, her voice breaking. Black SUVs, professional extraction. The school thinks she went home sick with me. No one even knows she's missing yet. Who are they, Marina? They call themselves the Phoenix Group, military contractors they claim, working with DoD authorization. But Sarah, the man who called me, he knew things about our family, about Dad's service record, about your classified missions. This isn't some random kidnapping. Sarah had begun pacing the narrow aisles of her shop, past shelves lined with aircraft, parts and navigation equipment. Her mind was already shifting into mission planning mode, the mental discipline that had kept her alive through 3 combat deployments. What do they want? All of my nightshade research, the original test data, the modifications I've been working on, everything. They gave me 6 hours to gather it all and meet them at some compound in the mountains. Alone. That's not happening. Sarah's voice had gone cold, controlled. You're not meeting anyone anywhere. Where's Emma now? They let me talk to her for 30 seconds. She's scared but trying to be brave. God, Sarah, she asked if I was coming to get her soon. What am I? Supposed to tell my baby? Sarah had stopped pacing, her gaze falling on a framed photograph tucked behind the cash register. It showed 3 generations of Chen women, herself, Marina, and Emma at last year's air show. Emma grinning beneath an oversized pilot's helmet. You tell her that Aunt Sarah is coming, she'd said quietly, and that everything's going to be okay. But making everything okay required resources Sarah no longer had. As a civilian, she had no authority, no backup, no access to the kind of equipment needed for a tactical rescue operation. The local police wouldn't believe her story without proof, and by the time federal agencies could be convinced to act, Emma would be dead. Marina had transmitted the compound's coordinates, remote facility nestled in the mountains east of Bakersfield, accessible only by helicopter or a treacherous mountain road. Satellite imagery showed it was heavily defended, with clear sight lines for miles in every direction. Any ground approach would be detected long before rescuers could reach the main buildings, which left only one option. Sarah had spent the next 4 hours planning, using skills she'd thought she'd never need again. She'd pulled up facility schematics from her old Pentagon contacts, analyzed wind patterns and approach vectors, and calculated fuel requirements for a mission that had approximately 0% chance of official approval. Then she'd driven to Edwards Air Force Base. Getting onto the base had been surprisingly easy. Her military ID was still valid, a bureaucratic oversight she'd never bothered to correct, and the night security guards knew her by sight from her occasional consulting work with the test pilot program. She'd simply told them she was picking up some documents from Colonel Martinez's office, a perfectly reasonable request at 11 p.m. The hardest part had been choosing which aircraft to steal. The F-16 sitting in Hangar 7 was scheduled for a test flight the next morning, its fuel tanks topped off and weapon systems live for target practice. More importantly, it was one of the newer Block 70 variants, equipped with advanced avionics and electronic warfare capabilities that would give her a fighting chance against whatever defenses the compound might have. Sarah had performed her pre-flight inspection with the same methodical precision she'd used 1,000 times before, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. The familiar ritual was almost meditative, checking control surfaces, verifying fuel levels, testing radio equipment. For just a few minutes, she could pretend this was simply another training flight. The engine startup sequence brought back a flood of memories. The high-pitched whine of the turbofan spooling up, the subtle vibration through the airframe, the heads-up display flickering to life with its constellation of information. This was her element, the place where she'd always felt most alive. But as she'd taxied toward the runway, reality crashed back down. She was stealing military property to conduct an unauthorized rescue mission based on nothing more than her sister's panicked phone call. In the best-case scenario, she'd spend the next 20 years in federal prison. In the worst case, she'd be shot down by her own Air Force long before she reached Emma. The takeoff had been flawless, muscle memory guiding her through the acceleration and rotation as the F-16 clawed its way into the pre-dawn darkness. Only when she'd reached cruising altitude did she allow herself to think about what came next. Now, racing toward the compound with multiple interceptor aircraft closing in behind her, Sarah finally understood why her father had always said that the hardest battles were the ones you fought for. She was about to find out if love could overcome impossible odds. What do you think will happen next? Share your predictions in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling stories. The first warning came as Sarah crossed into restricted airspace above the Sequoia National Forest. Her radar warning receiver began chirping insistently, indicating that she was being painted by multiple tracking systems. Behind her, two F-22 Raptors had closed to within 30-mile sleek Predators that could end her mission with a single missile shot. Captain Chen, this is Colonel Williams' 412th Test Wing. The voice that crackled through her headset carried the weight of command authority. You will turn to heading 270 and return to Edwards immediately. This is not a request. Sarah recognized the voice. Jake Williams had been her squadron commander during her final deployment, a by-the-book officer who'd tried unsuccessfully to convince her to accept a promotion rather than leave the service. He was also a father of 2 daughters. Colonel, this is an emergency situation involving the kidnapping of a civilian child, she transmitted back. I'm requesting permission to proceed to the target coordinates I've already uploaded. Permission denied. Captain, you've stolen a military aircraft and violated approximately 12 different federal laws. The only way this ends well for you is if you follow orders and return to base. Sarah checked her navigation display. 15 minutes to the compound. The F-22s were closing fast, but she still had a slim tactical advantage. The F-16's smaller radar cross-section and her intimate knowledge of these mountains from countless training flights. Jake, she said, dropping the formality and hoping to reach the man beneath the rank. They have my 8-year-old niece. The people who took her claim to have DoD authorization, but they're operating outside official channels. If I turn back now, Emma dies. The radio stayed silent for nearly 30 seconds. Sarah used the time to drop altitude, skimming just above the tree line where the mountain's radar shadows might provide some concealment. The terrain below was rugged and unforgiving, a maze of granite peaks and deep valleys that had claimed more than one aircraft over the years. Sarah, Colonel Williams' voice had softened slightly. Even if everything you're saying is true, this isn't the way. Come back and we'll work through proper channels. FBI, DoD, whatever it takes. There's no time. They gave Marina 6 hours. That was 8 hours ago. She banked hard left, following a narrow canyon that she remembered from a training exercise 3 years earlier. The F-16's wingtips cleared the rocky walls by less than 50 feet on either side. Behind her, the F-22s had to climb higher to maintain safe separation from the terrain. Buying her precious minutes. Her secure satellite phone buzzed. Sarah fumbled for the device with one hand while maintaining control with the other, nearly sending the fighter into a granite cliff face before she managed to stabilize. Marina? Sarah, thank God. They moved Emma to a different location. The compound you're heading for, it's a trap. Ice flooded Sarah's veins. What do you mean, different location? I figured out who's behind this. It's not some shadow military group. It's Prometheus Defense Solutions, the contractor that was supposed to destroy all the Nightshade research data. They kept copies just like I did, but theirs are incomplete. They need my modifications to make the system operational. Sarah's mind raced. Prometheus Defense Solutions was a major military contractor with connections throughout the Pentagon and defense industry. If they were behind Emma's kidnapping, this was far bigger than a simple ransom situation. Where's Emma now? Still analyzing the intel they let slip, but I think she's at their primary research facility in Palmdale. Sarah, you need to abort. This whole thing is designed to get you killed. With you out of the picture, they think I'll be more compliant. They thought wrong. Sarah pulled up her navigation system, inputting new coordinates for Palmdale. The facility Marina described was another 40 miles northwest, right through some of the most heavily defended airspace in California. Sarah, no, you're flying into a kill zone. They have surface-to-air missiles, electronic warfare systems, everything. This isn't some third-world country. This is bleeding-edge American military technology. Then it's a good thing I helped design half of it. Sarah had been part of the team that developed countermeasures for exactly these kinds of systems. During her time with the 412th Test Wing, she knew their capabilities, their limitations, and most importantly, their weaknesses. The F-22s were closing again, having navigated around the mountain range. Sarah could see their contrails on her scope, 2 deadly arrows aimed directly at her heart. But she also noticed something else: additional aircraft, rising from Edwards and Nellis Air Force bases. The military was mobilizing serious resources to stop her, which meant someone with serious influence wanted her stopped. Marina, I need you to do something for me, Sarah said, pulling the F-16 into a steep climb that would momentarily silhouette her against the morning sky, but also give her a clearer picture of the tactical situation. Anything. Contact Captain Lisa Rodriguez at the Pentagon. She's in the Inspector General's office now. Tell her everything about Prometheus and Nightshade. If this goes sideways, someone needs to know the truth. Sarah, and tell Emma that her Aunt Sarah loves her more than flying. Sarah ended the call and switched her radio to the emergency frequency. What she was about to do would either save her niece's life or get them both killed, but she was out of alternatives. Edwards Control, this is Captain Chen. I'm declaring a military emergency under Article 86 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. I have evidence of a defense contractor using illegal means to acquire classified research data, including the kidnapping of American civilians. The response was immediate and came from multiple sources simultaneously. Colonel Williams' voice cut through the chatter. Sarah, you're in no position to declare anything. You're flying a stolen aircraft and making increasingly wild claims. Then explain why Prometheus Defense Solutions knew exactly which aircraft I would steal and when I would steal it. Sarah shot back. Explain why they had surface-to-air missiles positioned along my projected flight path to their compound. Explain why they knew about classified projects that were supposed to have been destroyed years ago. The silence that followed told Sarah everything she needed to know. Someone was listening who understood the implications of what she'd just said. She used that moment of uncertainty to execute a maneuver that would have been impossible in any aircraft other than an F-16. Rolling inverted, she pulled into a negative G dive that sent her plummeting toward the desert floor at nearly vertical angle. At the last possible second, she rolled upright and pulled out of the dive, leveling off barely 100 feet above the ground. The F-22s, caught off guard by the sudden maneuver, overshot her position by miles. Sarah was now flying nap of the earth, through a landscape she knew like her own backyard, using every ridge and valley to mask her radar signature. Her threat warning system was going crazy now, indicating multiple missile locks from ground-based systems. The Palmdale facility was defending itself, which meant she was heading in the right direction. but it also meant that the easy part of her mission was over. Sarah armed her aircraft's electronic warfare systems and selected her most advanced air-to-ground missiles. If Prometheus wanted a fight, she'd give them one they'd never forget. The simple woman who'd once stocked aviation parts was gone, replaced by a combat pilot with nothing left to lose. Emma was somewhere in that heavily defended facility ahead, and Sarah would move heaven and earth to bring her home. The desert floor rushed past in a blur of sand and sage brush as she prepared for the most dangerous aerial assault of her career. Behind her, the entire United States Air Force was mobilizing to stop her. Ahead, a private army waited with enough firepower to down a squadron of fighters. In between was just one woman in one stolen plane, flying on nothing but love and determination. Odds couldn't have been worse. Sarah smiled grimly and pushed her throttle to military power. She'd beaten worse odds before. Marina's voice crackled through the satellite phone one more time. "Sarah, I've been analyzing the facility schematics. There's something you need to know about Prometheus. They're not just after the Nightshade. Research, they're planning to sell it to foreign governments. Emma isn't just a hostage. She's leveraged for a deal that could compromise national security for decades." The full scope of the conspiracy finally became clear. This wasn't about money or even military technology. It was about treason on a scale that would make Benedict Arnold look like a petty thief. Sarah had thought she was conducting a rescue mission. Instead, she'd stumbled into the middle of the largest intelligence breach in American history, and the only thing standing between success and catastrophe was a fighter pilot who'd been out of the game for 3 years. Flying a stolen plane against impossible odds, the Palmdale facility appeared on the horizon, bristling with defensive systems and crawling with personnel who had orders to shoot her down on sight. Sarah took a deep breath and prepared to find out what she was really made of. The surface-to-air missile appeared on Sarah's threat display like a digital angel of death, a fast-moving blip rising from the Palmdale facility with her aircraft's name written on it in high explosive. "Missile launch, bearing 047, her aircraft's warning system announced in its maddeningly calm synthetic voice. "Time to impact, 45 seconds. Sarah's hands moved with practiced precision, deploying chaff and flares while throwing the F-16 into a violent evasive maneuver that would have killed most pilots. The G-forces slammed her deep into her ejection seat as she pulled a 9G turn. That made her vision tunnel and her bones ache. The first missile streaked past her left wingtip, its proximity fuse triggered by the chaff cloud she'd deployed. The explosion was close enough to rock her aircraft and spiderweb her canopy, but the F-16 held together. 2 more launches. Then 3. Sarah was now fighting for her life against a coordinated missile defense system that represented millions of dollars of cutting-edge technology. Each missile was smarter than the last, learning from her previous evasive maneuvers and adapting its attack profile accordingly. "This is insane," she muttered, rolling inverted and diving toward a cluster of radio towers that would mask her radar signature. "Marina, please tell me you have some good news." Her sister's voice was tight with fear. "I've been monitoring their communications. Sarah, they're not trying to capture you anymore. Orders came down from someone very high up. You're to be eliminated at all costs." A 4th missile exploded so close that shrapnel peppered her aircraft's belly. Warning lights illuminated across her instrument panel like a malevolent Christmas tree. Hydraulic pressure dropping. Engine temperature rising. Fuel leak detected. The F-16 was dying around her, and she was still 5 miles from the facility. "Maria, I need an alternate approach route. Something they won't expect." "There isn't one. The facility is built into a mountain face with overlapping defensive systems covering every possible angle of attack. Sarah, you need to eject, now, before the aircraft breaks apart." Sarah's hand moved instinctively toward the ejection handle, then stopped. Through her damaged canopy, She could see the Palmdale facility spread across the valley below, complex of buildings and hangars that looked more like a military base than a corporate research center. Somewhere in those buildings, Emma was waiting for rescue. If Sarah ejected now, her niece would die. The evidence of Prometheus's treason would disappear. The people responsible would walk away clean, probably with government contracts worth billions of dollars. Negative on the ejection, Sarah said grimly. I'm taking this bird all the way in. Sarah, don't be stupid. You can't save Emma if you're dead. I can't save her from prison either. Sarah selected her remaining air-to-ground missiles and began targeting the facility's defensive systems. If she was going down, she'd take as many of their weapons with her as possible. Maybe it would create enough chaos for a follow-up rescue mission to have a chance. The first Maverick missile streaked away from her aircraft, guided by the F-16's targeting system toward a radar installation on the facility's eastern perimeter. The explosion was spectacular, sending a mushroom cloud of debris and smoke hundreds of feet into the air. 2 more missiles followed in quick succession, targeting communication arrays and missile launchers. Sarah's attack was precise and devastating, the result of years of training and combat experience that Prometheus's mercenaries couldn't match. But her aircraft was failing faster than she could neutralize threats. The engine temperature red line was crossed, and she could smell smoke in the cockpit. The hydraulic failure had compromised her flight controls, making the F-16 increasingly difficult to fly. Her fuel was leaking from multiple punctures, leaving a trail of vapor that made her as visible as a comet. Sarah, I'm reading multiple. Aircraft inbound to your position. Marina's voice was filled with panic. Military and civilian. Someone's coordinating a major response. Through her cracked canopy, Sarah could see contrails approaching from multiple directions. The cavalry was coming, but it was too late to help her and too early to save Emma. Then, her radio crackled with an unexpected voice. Captain Chen, this is Colonel Martinez, 412th Test Wing. We've been monitoring your situation. Sarah's heart leaped. Colonel Martinez had been her mentor during her final years of service, the officer who'd signed off on her participation in the Nightshade Project. If anyone would understand what she was facing, it would be him. Colonel, I have a situation involving, we know about Prometheus, Sarah. The Inspector General's office has been investigating them for months. Your sister's information just gave us the evidence we needed for a full-scale operation. Relief flooded through Sarah's system, immediately followed by crushing realization. Sir, they have my niece. If you move against the facility now, already handled. The FBI hostage rescue team is standing by. But we need you to create a distraction. While they move in, can you keep their attention for another 10 minutes? Sarah looked at her instrument panel. Half the warning lights were now red, and the engine was making sounds that would have terrified a lesser pilot. The F-16 had maybe 5 minutes of flight time left, and that was optimistic. I can give you 5, maybe 6 minutes, she said. After that, I'm either on the ground or in pieces. Copy that. Sarah, what you've done today exposing this conspiracy, gathering intelligence under fire, it's the kind of heroism they give medals for. I don't want a medal, Colonel. I want my niece back. You'll have her, Martinez out. Sarah banked toward the facility's main complex, where the largest concentration of defensive systems remained operational. She had 5 minutes to be the most dangerous pilot in the sky, drawing fire and attention while the real heroes moved in on foot. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd stolen a fighter jet to conduct a solo rescue mission, only to discover that her real contribution would be as a decoy. But if it brought Emma home safely, Sarah would gladly play the part. She armed her remaining weapons and dove toward the Palmdale facility like an avenging angel, her damaged aircraft trailing, smoke and determination in equal measure. 5 minutes to save a life. 5 minutes to expose a conspiracy. 5 minutes to prove that sometimes the most ordinary people We're capable of the most extraordinary things. The mountain face rushed up to meet her as she began her final attack run. The tension is building. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and let me know in the comments which character you're rooting for. Your support helps me create more incredible stories like this one. Sarah's final attack run was poetry written in smoke and fire. With her F-16 disintegrating around her and enemy missiles converging from multiple directions, she threaded the needle between two radar installations and launched her last Maverick at the facility's main communications tower. The explosion lit up the morning sky like a second sunrise, sending twisted metal and electronics cascading down the mountainside. "Target destroyed," she reported to Colonel Martinez, fighting to keep her voice steady as another warning light joined the symphony of alarms in her cockpit. "Main communications are down." "Copy that, Viper. FBI reports they're inside the perimeter. Your niece is in Building 7, northwest corner of the complex." Sarah could see Building 7 through her spider-webbed canopy, a nondescript concrete structure that looked more like a warehouse than a high-tech research facility. But between her current position and that building lay a gauntlet of defensive systems that were now focused entirely on destroying her aircraft. The F-16's engine finally gave up the fight with a mechanical scream that Sarah felt in her bones. The massive turbofan that had powered her through 3 combat deployments and countless training missions ceased completely, leaving her flying a $29 million glider with the aerodynamic properties of a brick. "Engine failure," she reported, already calculating glide ratios and emergency landing options. "I'm going down. Sarah, eject." "You've done enough." But ejecting would send her drifting slowly toward the ground on a parachute, completely vulnerable to enemy fire. Worse, it would leave the damaged F-16 to crash wherever physics and chance dictated, possibly into Building 7 itself. Instead, Sarah did something that would either be remembered as brilliantly tactical or criminally insane. She aimed her dying aircraft directly at the facility's main defensive control center. "This is for Emma," she whispered, and dove toward the mountainside complex at 300 miles per hour. The control center was a hardened bunker built into the mountain face, its concrete walls designed to withstand everything short of a direct nuclear strike. It was also the nerve center for Prometheus's entire defensive network. Take it out, and their remaining weapons would be firing blind. Sarah held the F-16 in its death dive until the last possible second, then yanked the ejection handle with barely 500 feet of altitude remaining. The ejection sequence felt like being shot from a cannon. The canopy blew away in a shower of plexiglass fragments, immediately followed by Sarah's ejection seat, rocketing clear of the doomed aircraft. Below her, the F-16 continued its kamikaze run toward the control bunker. Sarah had perhaps 3 seconds to appreciate the view before her parachute deployed, jerking her upright with bone-jarring force. The world spun around her as she drifted toward the rocky mountainside, trying to steer her chute away from the worst of the terrain while simultaneously watching her aircraft complete its final mission. The F-16 hit the control bunker with the force of a small meteorite. $29 million of cutting-edge fighter aircraft, plus whatever fuel remained in its tanks, converted itself into pure kinetic energy in a fraction of a second. The explosion was visible from space and audible from 3 counties away. When the smoke cleared, the defensive control center had simply ceased to exist. Sarah touched down hard on a narrow ledge of granite, her parachute immediately caught by the mountain wind and threatening to drag her over the edge. She hit the quick-release mechanisms and rolled away from the cliff face, coming to rest against a boulder with her ears ringing and her body feeling like it had been used as a punching bag. But she was alive, and more importantly, she was only about half a mile from Building 7. Her satellite phone had somehow survived the ejection. Marina's voice was frantic. "Sarah, are you there? We saw the explosion." "I'm on the ground," Sarah gasped, testing her limbs for serious damage. Everything hurt, but everything still worked. Status on the rescue team? They're inside. Building 7 now. But Sarah, there's a problem. Prometheus has backup security systems that just activated when you destroyed their main bunker. The building is going into lockdown mode. Sarah struggled to her feet, looking down at the facility spread below her. She could see FBI agents in tactical gear moving between buildings, but Building 7 was sealed tight, its blast doors closed and its windows covered by steel shutters. How long before they can breach those doors? Hours, maybe. And Sarah, they're not the only ones with backup plans. I'm monitoring communications from Prometheus's corporate headquarters. They've activated something called Protocol 7. The name sent ice through Sarah's veins. Protocol 7 had been a theoretical contingency plan discussed during the Nightshade project. What to do if the technology fell into enemy hands? The answer had been simple and terrifying: destroy everything, including any witnesses who might compromise operational security. Marina, they're going to eliminate all evidence, including Emma. I know. FBI estimates 20 minutes before they can breach Building 7's defenses. But Protocol 7 goes into effect in 15. Sarah was already moving, half running, and half sliding down the mountainside toward the facility. Her flight suit was torn, and her body protested every step, but she'd been in worse situations during her military career. The key was to keep moving and keep thinking. Can you patch me through to the FBI team leader? Already done. Agent Morrison, meet Captain Sarah Chen. A new voice crackled through the phone. Captain, this is Special Agent Morrison, FBI HRT. I understand you have knowledge of this facility's security systems. I helped design some of them, Sarah replied, vaulting over a concrete barrier and sprinting toward Building 7. What's your current situation? We've got eyes on multiple hostiles inside the building, but they're heavily armed and unprepared. Positions. The blast doors are 2 feet of reinforced steel. We don't have anything that can get through them quickly. Sarah could see the FBI team now, taking cover behind vehicles and concrete barriers around Building 7's perimeter. The building looked like a fortress, its few windows now covered by steel plates, and its single entrance sealed by blast doors that belonged on a bank vault. But Sarah knew something the architects hadn't counted on. Agent Morrison, there's a maintenance tunnel that connects Building 7 to the facility's central ventilation system. It was added after the original construction to support some specialized research equipment. The entrance is on the north side, behind the emergency generator housing. We checked that area. It's sealed. Not from the inside. Sarah was close enough now to see the generator housing, a concrete structure designed to look like part of the mountain face. The tunnel has emergency access panels that can only be opened from inside the ventilation system. But if someone could get into the system from another building... She trailed off, realizing what she was suggesting. Captain, you're not thinking of going in there yourself. Sarah was already changing direction, heading for Building 3, which housed the main air handling equipment for the entire complex. Agent Morrison, how long did you say we have before Protocol 7 activates? 12 minutes now. Then we don't have time to argue about this. The entrance to Building 3 was unsecured. A simple steel door marked with warnings about authorized personnel only. Sarah's military ID still worked on the electronic lock, a security oversight that Prometheus would probably regret if any of them survived the next few minutes. Inside, the building was a maze of massive air handling units, ductwork, and mechanical equipment that hummed and roared with industrial efficiency. Sarah had studied the schematics during her time with the Nightshade project, but seeing the system in person was still overwhelming. Marina, I need you to guide me through this. The tunnel entrance should be somewhere near the main air intake manifold. I'm pulling up the blueprints now. Sarah, are you sure about this? That tunnel is barely big enough for one person, and if they detect you, They're going to kill Emma anyway if we don't try. Sarah found the access panel her sister described, a 3-foot square opening that led into the facility's ventilation system. The space beyond was dark and cramped, barely wide enough for her shoulders. Agent Morrison, I'm going in. Give me 10 minutes before you start your assault. If you don't hear from me by then, breach the doors anyway. Captain, this is insane. You're not trained for close-quarters combat. Sarah smiled grimly as she squeezed into the ventilation tunnel. Agent Morrison, I just stole a fighter jet, conducted a one-woman air assault on a fortified position, and crashed $29 million of taxpayer property into a mountain. At this point, sanity is a relative concept. The tunnel was a nightmare of sharp metal edges and mechanical obstacles. But Sarah pressed forward on hands and knees, following Marina's directions through the darkness. Behind her, she could hear Agent Morrison coordinating his team's assault. Ahead, somewhere in the maze of concrete and steel, Emma was waiting. Protocol 7 was now 8 minutes from activation. Sarah crawled faster. The ventilation tunnel ended at a grate overlooking Building 7's main laboratory. And what Sarah saw below made her blood freeze. Emma sat in a chair in the center of the room, her 8-year-old face streaked with tears, but her posture defiant. Around her, 6 armed mercenaries in tactical gear were positioning explosive charges throughout the laboratory, their movements efficient and professional. At a bank of computers along the far wall, technicians were frantically downloading data while simultaneously preparing demolition charges that would erase every trace of their activities. Sarah counted the opposition and calculated her odds. 6 armed professionals against 1 exhausted pilot with no weapons and no backup. The math wasn't encouraging, but then she noticed something that changed everything. Dr. Marcus Webb, Prometheus's chief technology officer, was standing near Emma, with what looked like a detonator in his hand. Sarah recognized him from intelligence briefings during her time with the Nightshade Project, a brilliant scientist who'd been suspected of selling military secrets, but never prosecuted due to lack of evidence. To -5 minutes until Protocol 7 activation, Webb announced to his team. All personnel prepare for facility sterilization. Emma looked up at the ceiling, and for a moment, Sarah could have sworn her niece was looking directly at her through the ventilation grate. Then Emma did something that made Sarah's heart swell with pride and terror in equal measure. You're all cowards, the 8-year-old said clearly, her voice carrying across the laboratory. My Aunt Sarah is coming for me, and she's going to stop you. One of the mercenaries laughed harshly. Your aunt is dead, kid. We watched her crash her plane into the mountain. She's not dead, Emma replied with absolute conviction. She promised she'd come get me, and my Aunt Sarah always keeps her promises. Webb raised the detonator. Enough chatter. Protocol 7. Activation in 60 seconds. Sarah knew she was out of time and options. The FBI team wouldn't reach them before the explosives detonated, and she couldn't take on 6 armed mercenaries in a straight fight, but she could create chaos. Sarah used her elbow to smash through the ventilation grate, dropping into the laboratory. Like an avenging angel, she landed hard on an equipment table, scattering scientific instruments and drawing every weapon in the room toward her position. Hello, boys, she said, rolling behind a bank of servers as automatic weapons fire erupted around her. Does anyone miss me? The laboratory erupted into chaos. Mercenaries shouted coordinates in flanking positions while their bullets chewed apart expensive research equipment. Sparks flew from damaged electronics, and chemical smoke began filling the air from punctured containers. Sarah used the confusion to her advantage, moving from cover to cover while the mercenaries tried to pin down her position. Her years of combat training hadn't prepared her for close-quarters battle in a confined space, but they had taught her that aggression and unpredictability could overcome superior numbers. Emma, stay down, she shouted, grabbing a wrench from a nearby tool cart and hurling it at the nearest mercenary. The improvised projectile caught him in the face, sending him stumbling backward into a bank of computers. To -30 seconds. Webb's voice was rising with panic as he realized his carefully planned operation was falling apart around him. Sarah spotted a fire axe mounted on the far wall and sprinted toward it, dodging bullets and leaping over laboratory benches like a contestant on a lethal obstacle course. Her fingers closed around the axe handle just as two mercenaries rounded the corner, their assault rifles already tracking toward her. The axe blade bit deep into the first mercenary's weapon, ruining his aim and giving Sarah the split second she needed to tackle him to the ground. They rolled across the floor in a tangle of limbs, fighting for control of his sidearm while his partner tried to get a clear shot. To -15 seconds. Sarah managed to wrench the pistol away from her opponent and put 2 rounds center mass into the second mercenary before rolling away from return fire. 4 hostiles down, 2 to go, plus Webb himself. But 15 seconds wasn't enough time to clear the room and get Emma to safety. That's when the FBI decided to make their entrance. The blast doors exploded inward with a sound like thunder, followed immediately by flashbang grenades that turned the laboratory into a strobe light hell of sound and fury. Through the chaos, Sarah could hear Agent Morrison's voice shouting tactical commands as his team poured into the room. Webb raised the detonator. With shaking hands, his finger hovering over the activation switch. Sarah didn't think. She simply threw the fire axe with all her remaining strength. The heavy blade rotated end over end across the laboratory, catching Webb in the chest and sending him crashing backward into a bank of servers. The detonator flew from his hands, skittering across the floor toward Emma's chair. Emma, showing the kind of quick thinking that ran in her family, kicked the detonator as hard as she could. The device sailed through the air and disappeared down an open floor drain. Protocol 7 deactivated, Sarah gasped, collapsing against a laboratory bench as FBI agents secured the remaining hostiles. Emma, are you hurt? Her niece shook her head, tears streaming down her face but her voice steady. I knew you'd come. I told them you'd come. Sarah staggered across the room and gathered Emma into her arms, holding her tight while FBI agents swept the facility for additional threats. Around them, the laboratory was a ruin of damaged equipment and scattered debris, but none of that mattered. Emma was safe. Agent Morrison, Sarah called out, still holding her niece. You'll want to secure all the computer equipment. This facility contains evidence of the largest intelligence breach in recent history. Already on it, Captain. We've got teams downloading everything before Prometheus can activate any remote deletion protocols. Sarah looked around the destroyed laboratory, thinking about the chain of events that had brought her here. 12 hours ago, she'd been stocking inventory in her aviation supply shop. Now she was standing in the ruins of a conspiracy that reached to the highest levels of government and defense contracting. What happens now? Emma asked quietly. Sarah looked down at her niece, brave, resilient Emma, who had faced down armed mercenaries with nothing but faith in her family. Now we go home, and I will teach you how to fly. Emma's face lit up with the first genuine smile Sarah had seen from her in days. Really? You'll teach me to be a pilot like you? If that's what you want. But first, we have to answer a lot of questions from a lot of very serious people. Through the shattered laboratory windows, Sarah could see news helicopters circling the facility like mechanical vultures. The story of the woman who stole a fighter jet to save her niece was about to become front page news around the world, but that was tomorrow's problem. Today, the only thing that mattered was the 8-year-old girl in her arms and the knowledge that sometimes being ordinary was just another word for being extraordinary when it counted most. Agent Morrison approached them, his tactical gear dusty from the assault. Captain Chen, there are some people in Washington who are very eager to speak with you. But first, medical teams want to check both of you over. Sarah nodded, Still not quite believing that the nightmare was over. Agent Morrison, what about the people behind this? The ones who gave Prometheus their orders? That's above my pay grade, ma'am. But I can tell you that this investigation is just getting started. What you uncovered today is going to have repercussions for years to come. Emma tugged on Sarah's flight suit. Aunt Sarah, are you in trouble for stealing the airplane? Sarah looked down at her niece and realized that she honestly didn't know. Technically, she'd committed multiple felonies, violated numerous military regulations, and caused millions of dollars in property damage. But she'd also exposed a conspiracy that threatened national security and saved an innocent life. I don't know, sweetheart. But whatever happens, it was worth it. Emma squeezed her hand. I think you're a hero. Sarah smiled, feeling tears she hadn't known she was holding back finally started to fall. I'm just your Aunt Sarah. That's all I've ever wanted to be. Outside, the desert sun was climbing toward its zenith, painting the mountains in shades of gold and amber. It was going to be a beautiful day. The debriefing lasted 18 hours and involved more alphabet agencies than Sarah knew existed. The FBI, CIA DOD, Inspector General's Office, Air Force Office of Special Investigations, and at least 3 congressional oversight committees all wanted their pound of flesh from the woman who had stolen a fighter jet and crashed it into a mountain. Sarah sat in a windowless conference room at Edwards Air Force Base. Her borrowed civilian clothes, a stark contrast to the sea of uniforms and suits surrounding her. Emma had been taken to the base hospital for observation, then released to Marina's custody with a promise that they would remain available for further questioning. Captain Chen, said Congresswoman Patricia Hawkins, chairwoman of the House Intelligence Committee, let's go through this one more time. You became aware of your niece's kidnapping at approximately 1847 hours yesterday, and your first instinct was to steal a military aircraft? Sarah had answered this question at least 20 times, but she maintained her patience. Ma'am, the kidnappers gave my sister 6 hours to deliver classified research data. By the time I learned of the situation, there were only a few hours remaining. Traditional law enforcement channels would not have been able to respond quickly. Enough, so you decided to take matters into your own hands. I decided to save my niece's life. Colonel Martinez, who had been silent for most of the proceedings, finally spoke up. Congresswoman, I think we're missing the larger picture here. Captain Chen's actions, while irregular, exposed a conspiracy that has compromised American military technology for at least the past 5 years. Prometheus Defense Solutions has been selling classified information to foreign governments, using kidnapping and extortion to acquire research data they couldn't obtain through legal channels. Senator Robert Hayes, ranking member of the Armed Services Committee, leaned forward. Colonel, that doesn't excuse theft of military property and unauthorized use of force. Captain Chen destroyed a $29 million aircraft and conducted what amounts to a terrorist attack on American soil. With respect, Senator, Sarah interjected, her voice carefully controlled. The facility I attacked was operated by foreign agents using American military technology to threaten American civilians. If defending my country and my family makes me a terrorist, then I'm proud to wear that label. The room fell silent. Sarah could see some of the officials exchanging glances, recognizing the political impossibility of prosecuting a decorated veteran who had exposed foreign espionage operations. While rescuing a kidnapped child, FBI Director James Crawford cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we need to focus on the intelligence value of what Captain Chen has given us. The data recovered from the Palmdale facility has already led to arrests in 3 countries and the identification of 17 compromised defense contractors. This is the largest counterintelligence breakthrough in a generation. That may be, Senator Hayes replied, but we cannot simply ignore the methods used to obtain this intelligence. If we excuse Captain Chen's actions, What message does that send to other service members who might decide to take the law into their own hands? General Patricia Morrison, Chief of Staff of the Air Force, had been silent throughout most of the proceedings, but now she fixed Senator Hayes with a steely gaze. Senator, Captain Chen is no longer a service member. She resigned her commission 3 years ago. Her actions while using military equipment were those of a civilian protecting her family from foreign agents operating on American soil. The legal distinction was subtle but important. As a civilian, Sarah couldn't be court-martialed under military law, but she could still face federal charges for theft, destruction of government property, and a dozen other offenses. Congresswoman Hawkins shuffled through her papers. Captain Chen, what is your understanding of your current legal status? Sarah had been dreading this question. Ma'am, I assume I'll be facing federal charges for theft of military property, at minimum. I understand the consequences of my actions and accept responsibility for them. And if you had to do it again, knowing what you know now about the legal ramifications? Sarah didn't hesitate. I'd do exactly the same thing. My niece is safe. A foreign espionage operation has been exposed, and classified military technology has been secured. If that costs me my freedom, it's a price I'm willing to pay. The room fell silent again. Sarah could see something shifting in the faces around the table, a recognition that they were dealing with someone whose moral compass pointed toward protecting others, regardless of personal cost. Director Crawford spoke again. There is another consideration here. Captain Chen's actions have generated significant public attention. The story of the woman who stole a fighter jet to save her niece has captured international media coverage. Prosecuting her now would create a public relations nightmare for the government. Senator Hayes frowned. We don't make legal decisions based on public opinion polls. No, but we do consider the broader implications of our actions. Captain Chen has become a symbol of American values, protecting family, exposing corruption, standing up to foreign threats. Prosecuting her would send a message that we punish heroes while rewarding the corporations that sell our secrets to enemy nations. General Morrison nodded. There's also the practical consideration that Captain Chen's expertise will be valuable in cleaning up the mess created by Prometheus and their co-conspirators. She has intimate knowledge of the Nightshade Project and other classified programs that were compromised. Congresswoman Hawkins closed her folder. Captain Chen, the committee will need some time to deliberate. You're free to go, but please remain available for further questioning. Sarah stood, feeling like she'd just survived a different kind of aerial combat. Thank you, ma'am. Will I be able to see my niece? Of course. She's been asking for you. Sarah walked out of the conference room into the bright California sunshine, where Marina and Emma were waiting by a government sedan. Emma ran to her, wrapping her arms around Sarah's waist with the fierce intensity of an 8-year-old who had feared she might never see her aunt again. How did it go? Marina asked quietly. Sarah shrugged. About as well as expected for someone who committed multiple felonies on national television. But Emma's safe, and that's all that matters. Emma looked up at her. Are you going to jail? I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe. That's not fair. You're a hero. Sarah knelt down to Emma's level. Heroes don't break the law, even for good reasons. What I did was necessary, but it wasn't right. Do you understand the difference? Emma nodded solemnly. Like when I hit Tommy Peterson because he was being mean to Sarah Kim. It was necessary, but I still got in trouble. Exactly like that. Marina smiled despite everything. She gets that moral complexity from your side of the family. Sarah stood up, looking out at the flight line where F-16s were preparing for afternoon training missions. Somewhere out there, pilots were running through the same exercises she'd done thousands of times, preparing for threats they hoped would never come. What happens now? Marina asked. Now we wait and see if the government decides to make an example of me or make me A hero. Either way, we're going home. Emma took Sarah's hand. Will you still teach me to fly? Sarah looked down at her niece Brave. Brilliant Emma, who had stared down armed mercenaries and emerged with her spirit intact. If they let me, absolutely. But first, you have to promise me something. What? Promise me you'll never steal. Fighter jet to rescue anyone. Once per family is enough. Emma giggled, the sound like music after everything they'd been through. I promise, but what if someone really needs rescuing? Sarah exchanged a look with Marina, both of them recognizing the stubborn idealism that ran in their family like a genetic trait. Then you call the proper authorities and let them handle it. What if the proper authorities won't listen? Then you find a way to make them listen, but you do it legally. Emma considered this seriously. That sounds harder than stealing a fighter jet. Sarah laughed, the first genuine laugh she'd had in days. Trust me, sweetheart. Everything is harder than stealing a fighter jet. That's the easy part. As they walked toward the parking lot, Sarah's satellite phone buzzed with an incoming call. She recognized the number as belonging to Colonel Martinez. Sarah, turn on the news, any channel. She found a television in the base visitor center, where CNN was running a breaking news story. The banner at the bottom of the screen read, Pentagon announces investigation into defense contractor corruption. The reporter was standing outside the Pentagon, looking grave and authoritative. Sources tell CNN that the investigation was triggered by intelligence gathered during yesterday's dramatic rescue operation in California, where former Air Force pilot Sarah Chen stole a fighter jet to save her kidnapped niece from foreign agents operating on American soil. The story cut to footage of Sarah's damaged F-16 diving toward the Prometheus facility, followed by the massive explosion when it struck the defensive control bunker. The images were spectacular and terrifying, like something from a Hollywood action movie. The Pentagon has not confirmed details of the operation, but sources indicate that Captain Chen's actions exposed what may be the largest intelligence breach in recent American history, with classified military technology being sold to foreign governments by American defense contractors. Emma tugged on Sarah's sleeve. Aunt Sarah, you're famous. Sarah watched her stolen aircraft crash into the mountain over and over as the news channel replayed the footage. She looked heroic and completely insane at the same time. This is either going to save me or destroy me, she murmured. Marina squeezed her shoulder. I vote to save. The public loves a good underdog story, especially when the underdog is protecting a child from foreign agents. Sarah's phone buzzed again. This time it was a text message from an unknown number. Captain Chen. This is Agent Rodriguez from the Inspector General's office. We need to talk. The story is much bigger than anyone realizes. Can you meet tonight? Your sister has my contact information. Sarah showed the message to Marina, who went pale. Lisa Rodriguez, she's the one I called during your mission. What? Do you think she wants? I think, Marina said slowly, that your flight yesterday was just the beginning. Sarah looked at Emma, who was watching the news coverage with wide eyes, then back at the message on her phone. She'd hoped that crashing a stolen fighter jet into a mountain would be the end of her adventure, but apparently it was just the opening act. Well, she said, I always wanted my life to be more interesting. Emma grinned up at her. Be careful what you wish for, Aunt Sarah. Too late for that, sweetheart. Way too late. 6 months later, Sarah stood on the tarmac at Edwards Air Force Base, watching Emma complete her first flight in a T-6 Texan trainer aircraft. The 8-year-old wasn't old enough to actually pilot the plane, but the Air Force had arranged for her to experience flight in the front seat while an instructor handled the controls from behind. The T-6 touched down with barely a bump, and Sarah felt the familiar surge of pride that came from watching someone discover the magic of flight for the first time. Emma emerged from the cockpit, grinning from ear to ear, her oversized flight helmet making her look like a miniature astronaut. Aunt Sarah, did you see? We did a barrel roll and everything." Sarah swept her niece into a hug, spinning her around on the tarmac. "I saw, sweetheart. How did it feel?" "Like flying should feel every day," Emma replied with the matter-of-fact wisdom of a child. Colonel Martinez approached them, smiling broadly. "She's a natural, Sarah. Took to the controls like she was born for it. She comes from a family of pilots," Sarah replied. "It's in the DNA." The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of congressional hearings, media interviews, and legal proceedings that had ultimately vindicated Sarah's actions while landing dozens of Prometheus conspirators in federal prison. The investigation triggered by her dramatic rescue mission had uncovered a web of corruption that reached from defense contractors to Pentagon officials to foreign intelligence services. Sarah herself had been cleared of all charges after a federal judge ruled that her actions constituted legitimate defense of American citizens against foreign agents operating on U.S. soil. The ruling had been controversial, but public opinion overwhelmingly supported the woman who had risked everything to save her niece and expose a conspiracy that threatened national security. More importantly, Emma had recovered completely from her ordeal, showing a resilience that both amazed and worried her family. The 8-year-old had become something of a celebrity in her own right, invited to speak at schools about courage and family loyalty. She handled the attention with the same matter-of-fact attitude she brought to everything else. "Sarah." Agent Lisa Rodriguez approached from across the tarmac, her briefcase and serious expression indicating that this wasn't a social visit. "Do you have a few minutes?" Sarah's heart sank slightly. Agent Rodriguez had become a regular fixture in her life over the past 6 months, appearing whenever the investigation uncovered new threads that needed to be followed. Most of the time, it meant another round of depositions or testimony. "More congressional hearings?" Sarah asked. "Actually, no. This time it's good news." Rodriguez smiled, an expression that transformed her usually stern features. "The Attorney General's office has finished its final review of your case. All potential charges have been formally dismissed. You're completely clear." Relief flooded through Sarah's system. She'd been living under a cloud of potential prosecution for months, never quite sure whether the government would ultimately decide to make an example of her. "There's more," Rodriguez continued. "The Pentagon has made you an offer. They want to bring you back on active duty with a promotion to lieutenant colonel and assignment to a new counterintelligence unit focused on defense contractor oversight." Sarah felt Emma's hand slip into hers. What would that mean? It would mean returning to military service, probably with significant travel and classified assignments. "It's an honor, Sarah. They're basically offering to put you in charge of preventing another Prometheus situation." Sarah looked down at Emma, who was watching the conversation with the intense focus of a child who understood that important decisions were being made around her. "Can I think about it?" "Of course. But Sarah, this is the kind of opportunity that doesn't come along often. You'd be making a real difference, using your experience to protect the country." After Rodriguez left, Sarah and Emma walked to the edge of the flight line, where they could watch aircraft taking off and landing against the backdrop of the Mojave Desert. It was the same view Sarah had seen thousands of times during her military career, but it looked different now, more precious somehow. "Are you going to take the job?" Emma asked. Sarah considered the question carefully. 6 months ago, she would have jumped at the chance to return to military service with increased responsibility and rank. But 6 months ago, she hadn't understood what it meant to put family first. "What do you think I should do?" Emma was quiet for a long moment, watching an F-22 climb toward the desert sky. "I think you should do what makes you happy, not what other people think you should do. And what makes me happy? Teaching me to fly and running your shop and being my Aunt Sarah instead of Lieutenant Colonel Sarah." Sarah smiled, feeling a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying lift from her shoulders. "You know what? You're absolutely right. So, you're not taking the job? I'm not taking the job. I have more important things to do. Emma grinned and threw her arms around Sarah's waist. Like teaching me to be a pilot? Like teaching you to be whatever you want to be. They stood together on the tarmac, watching aircraft practice the eternal dance of takeoff and landing, while the desert wind carried the scent of sage and jet fuel. In the distance, Sarah could see Marina walking toward them from the parking lot, probably coming to collect Emma for the drive back to Lancaster. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. She expected it to be from Rodriguez or one of the other officials who had become regular parts of her life, but instead it was from Tom Patterson, a retired Air Force mechanic who had been trying to sell his aviation business in Palmdale. Sarah, are you still interested in expanding your operation? My insurance company says I need to retire by next month. Shop, inventory, and customer list for $40,000. It's yours if you want it. Sarah showed the message to Emma, who read it carefully. That's near where the bad guys had their base, isn't it? About 10 miles away. It's a good location, right near the airport. Are you going to buy it? Sarah looked at the message again, then at the aircraft around them, then at her niece's eager face. For the first time in months, the future felt full of possibilities instead of obligations. We're going to buy it, you and me, together. Chen. Aviation Services, family owned and operated. Emma's eyes widened. Really? I can help run the business? As soon as you're old enough to reach the cash register. But first, you have to finish school and learn everything there is to know about aircraft maintenance and flight operations. And flying? Especially flying. Marina reached them just as they were shaking hands on their new business partnership. What are you two plotting now? World domination through general aviation, Sarah replied. Want to be our CFO? Marina laughed, the sound carrying across the desert like music. Why not? It can't be more dangerous than having a sister who steals. Fighter jets. As they walked back toward the parking lot, Emma skipping between her aunt and mother, Sarah felt a contentment she hadn't experienced since before her military career began. She had started this adventure as a simple woman running a small business, and she was ending it the same way with the addition of one extraordinary experience and a deeper understanding of what really mattered. Aunt Sarah? Emma asked as they reached Marina's car. Yes, sweetheart? When I'm old enough to be a pilot, will you teach me how to do barrel rolls? Sarah grinned, thinking of all the adventures that lay ahead of them. Emma, I'll teach you everything I know, but you have to promise me one thing. What's that? Promise me you'll use your powers for good. Emma considered this seriously, then nodded. I promise. But what if the bad guys have fighter jets too? Sarah exchanged a look with Marina, both of them recognizing the stubborn heroism that seemed to run in their family like a genetic trait. Then we'll figure something out. We always do. As they drove away from Edwards Air Force Base, Sarah looked back at the flight line one more time. Somewhere out there, new pilots were learning to fly, preparing for missions they couldn't yet imagine. Some of them would face impossible choices and discover what they were really made of. Sarah hoped they would choose a family. She hoped they would choose love over duty when it mattered most. And she hoped they would remember that sometimes the most extraordinary thing you can do is simply refuse to give up on the people who matter most. The desert highway stretched ahead of them, leading back to Lancaster and the quiet life Sarah had chosen over glory. In the back seat, Emma was already making plans for their new aviation business, her voice full of excitement and possibility. It was exactly where Sarah wanted to be. 6 months ago, she had been a simple woman who stole a fighter jet to save lives. Today, she was a simple woman who had chosen love over everything else. And that, she reflected, was the most heroic thing of all. What did you think of this thrilling journey? Share your favorite moment in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss our latest dailies. What kind of story would you like to hear next? Let me know in the comments, and I might just turn it into our next adventure together. The small Cessna 172 banked gently over the Mojave Desert, its engine humming contentedly in the afternoon. Sun, in the pilot's seat, 13-year-old Emma Chen had her hands steady on the controls, her movements precise and confident despite her youth. "Aunt Sarah, can we practice that emergency landing procedure again?" Emma asked through the intercom, her voice crackling with the same enthusiasm that had driven her through 5 years of intensive flight training. Sarah smiled from the instructor's seat, watching her niece handle the aircraft with skills that surpassed many licensed pilots. "One more time, then we head home. Your mom's making dinner, and you have homework. Math homework is boring compared to flying. Math homework is what keeps airplanes in the sky, sweetheart. Physics, engineering, navigation, it all starts with understanding numbers." Emma executed a perfect simulated engine failure, gliding the Cessna to a textbook emergency landing approach before Sarah took control for the actual touchdown. Chen Aviation Services had grown into one of the most respected flight training schools in Southern California, with Emma serving as both student and inspiration to countless other young pilots. As they taxied back to the hangar, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since that desperate morning when she'd stolen an F-16 to save her niece's life. The quiet business, the family dinners, the simple joy of teaching others to fly, this was the life she'd chosen, and she'd never regretted it for a moment. "Next week, can we practice formation flying with Uncle Marcus?" Emma asked, referring to Colonel Martinez, who had become an honorary family member and frequent visitor to their operation. "If you ace your algebra test," Emma grinned. "Deal, but only because I want to learn how to fly jets someday." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "Emma, don't worry, Aunt Sarah. I promise I'll never steal one." That's the incredible story of Sarah Chen, the simple woman who became a hero when her family needed her most. What did you think of this epic journey from small-town shop owner to fighter jet pilot to loving aunt and successful business owner? If this story keeps you on the edge of your seat, smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our thrilling dailies. Share this video with anyone who loves stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. What kind of adventure should we explore next? A mysterious treasure hunt? A spy thriller? A heartwarming rescue story? Drop your suggestions in the comments below. Your idea might become our next epic tale. And remember, heroes come in all shapes and sizes. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to give up on the people you love. Until next time, keep flying high.